How's it going, everyone? Anthony here from MTG Alpha. I have here my Slivdrazi deck tech here. The commander is Rukarumel Biologist. Came out with the Commander Master set. It enters when it enters, you choose a creature type. Slivers you control and non-token creatures you control are the chosen type in addition to their other types. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. You can pay 3 to tap and create a 1/1 colorless Sliver creature token. This deck list was inspired by the Slivdrazi Monstrosity Test card that came out with the mystery boosters. Very similar to Rukarumel, which came out later on. So if you want to really have some fun with this deck, you can just kind of like swap it out and just play this as the Slivdrazi Monstrosity commander, which is really fun. This here is a legendary Sliver and Eldrazi. It combines the key like sort of effects and keywords that are associated with the Eldrazi's and Slivers. So Eldrazi's you control are Slivers in addition to their types. Slivers you control have Devoid and Annihilator 1. Annihilator is when a creature attacks, then the defending player has to sacrifice that many permanents, in this case 1, for each of the Slivers, really when they attack. And then you can pay 3 any number of times to create a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Sliver creature token that has sacrifice this creature, add 1 colorless. So super fun card. When I saw this playtest card, it really gave me the idea of combining the Slivers and the Eldrazi, which is really great because Eldrazi's are both very fun tribal types to build around. Slivers, you can just spam a bunch of Slivers out on the board. They all feed off of each other with their keyword abilities, so they all kind of gain these new keyword abilities as each other one enters. Eldrazi's fun because you get to play just some giant, crazy, borderline broken cards, just basically instant win on cast cards. I haven't played really any games where I get out some large Eldrazi and then the game continues after that. Usually opponents scoop. So it's really cool that we can do both of these things. Now with Rukarumel, it's kind of like, well, I should say with the Slivdrazi, there's a few different, like you can get the effect off of this card without playing it, is what I'm saying. So you have the Sliver Queen effect where you can just create a bunch of Sliver tokens. In this case, they have more of that Eldrazi effect. And given our Eldrazi's, the Sliver creature type is something we can do in this deck. And giving Slivers we control Annihilator, there are some ways to do that as well. The main keyword that is associated with Eldrazi is Annihilator and Devoid. It's a little tricky to get Devoid with all of your creatures, so hopefully at some point there will be easier ways to make our creatures colorless with Devoid, because there's some synergies there. However, if you did want to lean more into the colorless synergy with your Eldrazi, it's a little bit of a weird way to do it, but you can do that with Mycosynth, and there's a Sliver that makes your Slivers colorless, and there's some other cards that make your creatures colorless. But you're kind of a little too much on the top end at that point. The way that this is built is we're going to get our Slivers out, which is you're usually, you know, setting yourself up defensively, and you're securing your board state with your Slivers out early, and then we're going to drop our Eldrazi, which are usually higher cost, and so it's just a little weird to kind of build it opposite. But Annihilator, though, is definitely a keyword that we want to have on all of our stuff, and luckily we do have some ways to do that. So without getting into it anymore, let's just take a look at the deck and all the cards here. So first of all, Rukarumel, we do get to choose a creature type as it enters. There's a few different things that we want to do because we have some combos in the deck like World Tree and the Realm Breaker here. So let's just look at this. So we have World Tree, which combos with our commander. Enters tap, taps for green. As long as you control 6 or more lands, lands you control tap for any color, which is great. And then we can pay Wooburg twice, and then tap and sack this to search our library for any number of God cards, put them onto the battlefield, shuffle your library. So with Rukarumel, if we choose God as it enters, then all creatures we control and creatures that are not on the battlefield are now God creature types. And then we just have to ramp up to 10, pay Wooburg twice, sack it, and we could just dump our entire, all the creatures from our library onto the battlefield. This is, it's so satisfying to make it happen, and I usually do make this happen once every 3 games, but I never really get to see the benefit of all of my creatures being out at the same time. So really good. And then same with Realm Breaker, same thing, except we get to pay 10 colorless, sack it, and we're searching for Praetor cards instead of God cards. So just make sure that when you play your commander, have an idea of what's out and what's going to be out. There's been times I've had my commander out, and then I drop World Tree. I've already named a different creature type, so now I'm trying to figure out, well, I need to draw into these other cards, or I need to get rid of my commander, recast it, and then I can pop off. But yeah, you would choose Praetor with Realm Breaker of the Evasion Tree, and then just play all of your creatures. Same with World Tree. But most of the time, we're going to be choosing Eldrazi, or Slivers you control and non-token creatures you control are the chosen type. Same is true for creature spells you control. Actually, I think I'm trying to think. It really depends on like the line of play, because you could choose Slivers as well. So Slivers you control are Slivers, non-token creatures you control are Slivers, and then creature spells and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield, all Slivers. So if you choose Slivers, then that's going to be like the ideal thing to do, because you want your Eldrazi to have the Slivers creature type. Because by the time you play your Eldrazi, they're going to gain all the abilities of your Slivers, like haste, flying, ETB, exile a permanent, can't be countered, shroud, deal damage, draw a card. It gets like really, really crazy. So that's something to consider. Some other ways we can spread that creature type would be Arcane Adaptation. It does the same exact thing, except you choose it as it enters. And then it's just creatures you control are that chosen type in addition to their other types. Maskwood Nexus, creatures you control are every creature type, so you don't have to worry about thinking about things too much. And then you can pay 3 to create some shapeshifter tokens. There's no coat of arms in this deck, but if you want to, I don't really think that it's there's synergy there, but it's not the best synergy. There's so many good cards that you could put in this deck. I think that's a card that you would consider taking out pretty early on when deck building. Hivestone, creatures you control are Slivers in addition to their other types. So if you have this out, then that's fine. You don't have to worry about naming Slivers. The only thing that sucks about it is you can't like tutor for them, and I'll show you later. Mirror Entity. This is every creature type. You could pay X. X could be 0. I don't know how you do that, but maybe you can. In some situations you can. Until end of turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX and gain all creature types. So you could pay 1 for this just to make sure you're not killing off all your creatures somehow. Even though there's a lot of pumping and pumping up and stuff like that, but it gains all creature types. So this is another good way that we can give all of our creatures, like Slivers, Eldrazi, whatever the line of play happens to be. This also synergizes with. Let's just go ahead and pull that out real quick. I don't want to go over every single card, but there are so many good cards in this deck that there are quite a few cards I wanted to highlight here. So I've kind of overlooked this card a few times. Really have to kind of read it carefully. It's a 3-drop Eldrazi. It's a legendary Eldrazi for 3, which is pretty cool. Just because of that reason only. It's a 2/2, but whenever this or another colorless creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. Again, not really a whole lot of reason to go colorless synergy with your Slivers. However, we're producing a lot of like colorless Slivers, colorless shapeshifters. We have our Scions, our Eldrazi Scions and Eldrazi Spawn tokens, and as we sack those, we gain colorless mana, which would in this case create experience counters. You can pay Wooburg any number of times, really. Creatures you control, and that's all creatures you control, get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of experience counters. Scions and spawns you control gain Indestructible and Annihilator 1 until end of turn. So with Mirror Entity, and also those other cards we mentioned, if you want, you can name Scions or Spawn, make all your creature Scions and Spawns. That way all of your Slivers now have Annihilator 1 and Indestructible, which is nice. But giving our Slivers Annihilator is pretty cool. We could also just do that with Mirror Entity, because in this case, we can pay 0 to give them all creature types, effectively giving them Scions and Spawn creature type. And then they're gaining the, as long as we can dump 5 into here, then they're going to be gaining power equal to the number of experience counters. So instead of like overpaying, you can just activate this ability for 0 and then dump whatever mana you were going to dump into that into Azlask. And then even if they get +1/+1 until end of turn, whatever, you have to pay 5 to activate this ability to give them Annihilator and Indestructible. So it's kind of cool. This will get experience counters from you sacrificing all of your spawns. So that's not too difficult. It's just really great to give the Scions and Spawns you control Annihilator. But anyways, the best way to work out your mana base in this deck is with the talismans, because they tap for a colorless when there are certain spells that we cast that need straight up colorless. But we also get a chance to play our colored mana, because we do have a lot of Wooburg, as you saw, white, blue, black, red, green casting costs. So we really have to do both. And so the best way to do that would be with the talismans. As you can see, we could tap colorless black, green, colorless green, blue, and then the pain lands, which are perfect in this deck. So we have all of the pain lands. And so here are some as an example here. So these will tap for colorless for Eldrazi's and tap for colors to activate our more restrictive mana costs, but also our Slivers themselves. Secluded Courtyard, Cascading Cataracts, which is great too, because we could also filter out our mana. If we have a bunch of colorless mana, we can get 5 mana in any combination of colors. That's great to just get the white, blue, black, red, green real easily to cast our commander, cast our legendary Slivers, activate the ability of Azlask. And then so we have a few other examples of that. Now, another really good way to, one, ramp, but also guarantee that we're able to play the cards that we want to play, because it's not always easy playing, casting something for white, blue, black, red, green. It's very restrictive. Bloom Tender is great for this. So as long as we can get out like one of those, like we get out our commander, now Bloom Tender is going to tap for 5, and we'll be able to, for each color among permanents you control, add 1 mana of that color. So we can tap for white, blue, black, red, green. So Bloom Tender taps for Wooburg, and we can just, boom, that's a legendary right here. Just tap this and we can cast a legendary or activate an ability of Azlask. Same with Fey Burrow Elder. For each color among permanents you control, add 1 mana of that color. It also gets +1/+1 for each color among permanents you control. So this can become a 5/5 Vigilance, which is nice. Dryad of the Elysian Grove. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, so we get to ramp, and lands get to tap for any color. Same with Chromatic Lantern. Lands you control tap for any color. So for our Slivers, these are the best Slivers in my opinion. This deck was previously a just straight up Sliver deck, and it was really fun, but it was kind of linear, and if I wasn't able to, there just wasn't like that good. The Slivdrazi combo is like the perfect match. So with the Slivers, it's like you can get them out, but if there's no way to give them like Indestructible, it just takes one board wipe and then you're screwed, and then now what do you do? Especially when your card draw is coming from dealing damage, combat damage. So so the point is that I've had this deck for years now, and I think that these are the best Slivers in here. We have Sliver creatures you control have flying. Replicate, so this is a newer one. Each Sliver spell you cast as Replicate, the Replicate cost is equal to its mana cost. So we can, if we're, anything we pay, and this is each Sliver spell again. So when you're looking at these, think about, how does this work with my Eldrazi? So how is this going to work with Ulamog or Emrakul? So Emrakul, I mean, you know, Ulamog has flying. And the Replicate, there's a legend, but we have ways to get around the legendary rule too. But just Void Winnower, for example. There's just, think about Eldrazi. Replicate, you just pay the cost of it and then you get a copy of it. Slivers have Shroud, essentially, can't be the target of spells or abilities. Slivers have Haste. Slivers tap for mana of any color, so think about the spawn tokens and scion tokens that you have to sack to get a colorless out of it. You can produce those pretty easily, but now you get to tap them for colors. Same with Gemhide Sliver. Cloud Shredder Sliver gives Sliver creatures you control flying and haste. Imagine any of the Eldrazi with haste. Slivers, when this comes into play, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Slivers can't be blocked except by Slivers. Think about the Eldrazi. Whenever a Sliver deals damage to its controller, its controller gains that much life. So it's a pseudo lifelink, but if we give everything lifelink, then it's doubling the lifelink essentially. Sliver spells can't be countered. That works with our Eldrazi. Slivers you control have double strike. Whenever a Sliver deals combat damage to a player, its controller may draw a card. Sliver creatures you control, when they enter, you may exile target creature and opponent controls until this creature leaves the battlefield. So some good removal. And then we have our legendary Slivers. Sliver creatures you control have indestructible, which is good. That'll secure our board state. Sliver Overlord lets us pay 3 to search your library for a Sliver card, put it into your hand. So that's really good for getting out the other Slivers if we have Morophon out, because Morophon reduces the cost of your cards by white, blue, black, red, green. So any of these would then be free. So we could just pay 3 to, with Morophon out, tutor for any of our legendary Slivers and then just cast them for free. But we also get to pay 3 and search for really anything if everything's a Sliver. We could search for you know, Ulamog or something, one of our Eldrazi's. So that's really good. Sliver Legion, all Sliver creatures get +1/+1 for each other Sliver on the battlefield. So we do have that coat of arm effect, and we're really kind of getting those numbers up there with our spawn and scion tokens. Sliver Queen, pay 2, and you get to just create a colorless Sliver token creature, a 1/1. So again, that was kind of the idea with the Slivdrazi, except it costs 1 more. And we do kind of get that effect with our commander, except we do have to, we're paying an extra colorless, but we're also having to tap our commander. So this is nice to just get out those tokens. Sliver Grave Mother, the legend rule doesn't apply to Slivers you control. So now we can replicate our Slivers, and I think that there's some other ways. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, there's some other ways that we can clone our legendaries. Each Sliver creature card in your graveyard has Encore X, where X is mana value. That's actually kind of nice, because again, the board wipe situation is pretty tough to deal with just the Slivers out. But also, I mean, I have been board wiped with like Ulamog out, so this was a good way to get around that, because Encore, you can pay the cost, exile it from your graveyard. For each opponent, create a token that's a copy of, token copy that attacks that opponent this turn if able. They gain haste, sacrifice them at the beginning of the next session. So it's kind of like Myriad, but from the graveyard. And this is great because when you're dealing with a board wipe and you want to get out like Morophon, and then Morophon can help you like cast some things that are in your hand, whatever is in the graveyard, you kind of get that one-time effect, but also the Annihilator effects from that. If you have a lot of mana later in the game and you've just been board wiped and everything is a Sliver, then Slivers have Encore, then you could start casting your, Eldrazi from the graveyard to get those ETB effects, get those Annihilator effects, even out the board state, even if you only get one shot at doing so. First Sliver spells you cast have Cascade. Again, think about Eldrazi. Eldrazi costing 10, 12. So very high CMC, allowing you to effectively play lots of cards from that Cascade ability. And Morphon, of course, when it enters, choose a creature type. Spells of the chosen type you cast cost WUBRG less. You're probably going to want to choose Slivers because there's no sense in reducing the cost of Eldrazi, which are colorless, by these colored mana pips. This effect reduces only the amount of colored mana you pay. However, other creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. So Morphon's just really good for cheating out Slivers, especially our legendary Slivers, and if we can, our commander. So that's really nice when we're only paying commander tax to recast our commander from the command zone, as long as our commander is a Sliver with things like Arcane Adaptation and whatnot. So now for our Eldrazi, we have Ulalek, Fused Atrocity. This is nice because it does cost WUBRG. So Morphon in that case, if you really want, it's just kind of a one-off thing. Or, a combination of colorless. It is devoid, so it is effectively colorless. Whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, so now you could think, if you have this out early on, and you want to name Eldrazi to get its effect from the Slivers, you can. Whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, you may pay 2 colorless. If you do, copy all spells you control, then copy all other activated and triggered abilities you control. So think about all of the triggered abilities with the Slivers, and if your Slivers are Eldrazi, then you get to you get a little bit of like synergy here with this. So not a bad card, really. And of course, it's going to work very well with your Eldrazi's, like Hideous Taskmaster, which costs 7. It is devoid, it's colorless. Whenever you cast this spell, for each opponent, gain control of up to 1 target creature that player controls until end of turn. Untap those creatures. They gain Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1 until end of turn. Hideous Taskmaster has Trample, Haste, Annihilator 1. It's a 7/2. You can copy it. You can, the creatures that you gain control of are likely going to have the abilities of all of your Slivers as well. So you're going to, for this, you're going to steal a creature from each opponent. It's going to have Trample, Haste, Annihilator 1, and then presumably other effects like Can't Be Blocked, has Flying, Double Strike, +1/+1, Shroud, whatever other ability. So this is really gnarly to do to your opponents. Void Winnower, 9, 11, 9. Your opponents can't cast spells with even CMC and can't block with creatures with even CMC. So that's just kind of like a salty little card. The new Ulamog Defiler costs 10 colorless. When you cast it, target opponent exiles half their library rounded up. That's on cast. You can't target it unless you sacrifice 2 permanents. And it enters the battlefield with a number of 1/1 counters equal to the greatest CMC among cards in exile. That's going to be somewhere around 5 to 7 on average. So 5 to 7 counters on it. It's going to be up to 14 power total and toughness. And then it has Annihilator X, where X is the number of counters on it. So when you can swing with it, then they're going to have to sacrifice up to 7 on average. So somewhere around 5 to 7 per minute. Pretty decent. Imagine this now with flying, can't be blocked, has haste, can't be targeted. It has double strike. It's going to destroy an artifact or enchantment when it enters. You're going to draw a card when it deals damage. Imagine all of that on Ulamog. Like, the Eldrazi's are already crazy enough as it is. Flare of Loyalties, really like this card. When the pre-con came out for the Eldrazi's, a lot of the previous Eldrazi cards went up in price, so it looked like they went down for a little bit and they're kind of going back up again. But this card shot up in price, and but yeah, pretty good card. When you cast this spell, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. Until end of turn, it has base power and toughness 10/10, gains Trample, Annihilator 2, and Haste. This has Annihilator 2 and Trample, and it's a 10/10. All the different things you can do with that, even gaining control of your own Sliver to swing with. and giving it haste and whatnot. Kozilek the Great Distortion, cost 8 colorless and then 2, well, 8 of any color and then 2 colorless. When you cast this spell, if you have fewer than 7 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. So that is pretty decent. It has Menace. It's a 12/12, so it's a big boy. And if you're, dealing with some, if you're into countering spells and stuff, you have a wide range of CMC in this deck. So you can discard a card with any type of mana value to counter a spell with that mana value. So that's not a bad ability. I don't do it often, but when it does come up, it's pretty nice. Hit That Betrays, Annihilator 2. Again, the idea with the Eldrazi's in here were putting Eldrazi creatures in this deck that have Annihilator or some sort of crazy effect and a high toughness and power. So I wanted big boys with Annihilator because that's kind of the only ability that I wasn't really able to give to everything else. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, put that card onto the battlefield under your control. So kind of like a Turgid effect with Eldrazi that has Annihilator, and then we can copy things like this. This doesn't have Legendary, so we could easily copy this. We have the new Emrakul, World Anew, cost 12, any color, 12/12. When you cast this spell, gain control of all creatures target player controls, so on cast, so even if it's countered. Flying, protection from spells and from permanents that were cast this turn. And when it leaves the battlefield, sacrifice all creatures you control. Madness, pay 6, colorless. So pretty good. That is a legendary. And then for some of our more Eldrazi spells, and then that's about it here, we have Eldrazi Conscription. You can enchant a creature to give it +10/+10 trample and Annihilator 2. Again, I really like the ability to, this really is like a one-off way to turn anything into an Eldrazi for 8, so it's pretty cool to do that to our Slivers. Kozilek's Command, a nice instant speed X spell. You get to choose 2. Target player creates X 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens with sack, add 1 colorless. Target player scries X, then draws a card. Exile target creature with mana value X or less. Exile up to X target cards from graveyards. Of course, we're going to want to ramp. This is going to pump up our stuff and put out a pretty crazy board state. And then maybe exile, maybe scry. That's usually what I'm going to go with. Rise of the Eldrazi. And we have ways that we can copy a lot of these. So when you see some of these, think about what would happen if we copy the ability. So this can't be countered. This costs 12 total. Destroy target permanent. Target player draws 4 cards. You get to take an extra turn after this, then exile it. And then Ugin's Binding. For 3, it's colorless with Devoid. Instant. So we still have to pay the blue pip and then 2 of whatever. But it does have Devoid, so it counts as a colorless spell. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. And then this goes into the graveyard, and then whenever you cast a colorless spell with mana value 7 or greater, you may exile this from your graveyard, and when you do, return each non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. So we get that Cyclonic Rift effect. We cast it for 3, we get a bounce effect, like an unsummon effect. It goes into the graveyard at any point that we cast something, a colorless spell with mana value 7 or greater, then we get to get that Cyclonic Rift effect. So that's going to be, okay, we built up our board state, we're dropping in Eldrazi now, and then let's exile Ugin's Binding to clear the board and then swing Annihilate. It's pretty gnarly. But with that goes of Eternity. If a triggered ability of a colorless spell you control or another colorless permanent you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, copy it, you may choose new targets for the copy. So Ugin's Binding, Rise of the Eldrazi, Kozilek's Command, Eldrazi Conscription, Emrakul. We do have to deal with the legendary issue there, but again, we do have the Sliver Grave Mother. Hit That Betrays, Kozilek, Flare of Loyalties, Ulamog, Void Winnower, Hideous Taskmaster, Ulalek, Morophon, Realmbreaker, our Talismans, our Soul Ring, any colorless spell that we cast, we get to copy it, and we get a token copy of it. And this is the reason why I really considered putting Mycosynth Lattice in the deck. If you have it and you don't, and you're missing a card from this deck list is pretty tuned, so it's hard for me to take anything out. I really went through the deck multiple times and tried to figure out what I would take out. If you have any ideas, let me know. But if you happen to have Mycosynth Lattice and you're missing some other card in here, then I would add it with Echoes of Eternity, and to make all of your creatures and whatnot colorless, so that way you could just get this. But it just wasn't worth putting it in for like 2, maybe 3 cards in here. So yeah, that is the Slivdrazi Monstrosity Rukarumel Biologist deck list. So let me know what you think about that. I'll have the full deck list in the description. You could support the channel by visiting our TCG affiliate link, and also have a full deck list in the description. And that's all. Thanks for watching. Peace.